everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. Today I know I say this every single time, but today I have one of my bestest friends on, and she is so nice to do this with me. She's actually probably my number one supporter, listens to every episode, and I'm so blessed. So, Maddie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. You already said a couple of things that I would have said just as I listen to this podcast every time there's a new one. And I love you, Kara. So I'm excited to be able to be on this podcast with you. I live in Parowan, Utah, and I've been married for almost 8 years to my sweetheart, Jake. And we have two little kids. I have a almost 4-year-old boy named Hank and a 5-month-old girl named Opal. And that's us. It's our little life, but I'm really excited to be here.
I can't believe Opal's 5 months now.
I know. It's gone by so
That's
fast.
crazy. Today we're talking about marriage, and I have no skin in the game. So I'm not married. I don't have a relationship, but Maddie has a lot of skin in the game, and she has a relationship that I look up to and one that I want to have someday. And so I asked her if I could interview her about her marriage.
Glad that you brought that up, that we're talking about marriage today. And I was thinking about your potential listeners and maybe what they might be thinking when they see that it's a podcast about marriage. And so I actually wanted to share one thing just right off the bat, that first of
Please.
all, I'm just really not perfect and my marriage isn't perfect, but it is really important to me. And so I'm going to speak about it really positively, and I'm going to share really awesome highlight things about my relationship because I feel like that's been healthy for me and it helps build the kind of relationship that I want. But I also acknowledge that when we talk about marriage, that there are many people who really desire a marriage, and that's not happening for them right now. Or there are people who are in a marriage, but it's not an ideal situation, or it's not something that they're proud of right now or that they're excited about. And so I wanted to read just this quote from Elder Christofferson to start us out. He said, "To declare the fundamental truths relative to marriage and family is not to overlook or diminish the sacrifices and successes of those for whom the ideal is not a present reality. Some of you are denied the blessings of marriage for reasons including a lack of viable prospects, same-sex attraction, physical or mental impairments, or simply a fear of failure that, for the moment at least, overshadows faith. Or you may have married, but that marriage ended, and you are left to manage alone what two together can barely sustain. Some of you who are married cannot bear children despite overwhelming desires and pleading prayers. Even so, everyone has gifts, everyone has talents, everyone can contribute to the unfolding of the divine plan in each generation. Much that is good, much that is essential, even sometimes all that is necessary for now, can be achieved in less than ideal circumstances. So many of you are doing your very best. And when you who bear the heaviest burdens of mortality stand up in defense of God's plan to exalt his children, we are all ready to march. With confidence, we testify that the atonement of Jesus Christ has anticipated and in the end will compensate all deprivation and loss for those who turn to him. And this is my favorite part. No one is predestined to receive less than all that the Father has for his children." So I hope we remember that as we talk about all my situation. If it doesn't look anything like yours, it's okay. The wonderful blessings that Heavenly Father wants to give all of his children are available to all of his children. It may just not look the same right now, and that's okay.
And this is why I invited you, because you have all these wonderful insights.
No, you're so sweet.
No, I'm serious. I was just thinking about that too. I didn't even think about all of that. And so I'm so grateful that you were preparing and prepping for this, because I think that message is very important and a very good introduction. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And I totally understand that obviously have family members that didn't get married till they were older. I have family members that struggled with infertility. I have family members that maybe got married and weren't in the best relationship. And so, yeah, I think we all, if we aren't experiencing it ourselves, know someone and care about someone that has struggled with those things. And so I really appreciate you
Absolutely.
mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Any other thing you want to add? I want to give you the
No,
opportunity.
no, that's perfect.
So the first question is, how did you meet Jake? And tell us a little bit about him.
So it's kind of funny. I actually don't know how Jake and I met because I moved to Parowan when I was a freshman in high school, and Jake lived here already. But I had visited a lot growing up, and Jake was kind of a staple of the town. Parowan's not very big. It was a place everyone knows everyone. And so I'm sure I watched him play Little League, and I ran into him at the Dairy Freeze, and like I'm sure I met him several times. before I actually knew who he was. But when I think about actually meeting him and knowing who he was, I remember sitting next to him in biology when I was in ninth grade and he was in 10th grade. I just moved to Parowan, and so my schedule was a little bit messed up. So instead of being in the science class with the ninth graders, I was in the science class with the 10th graders. And I remember that the teacher gave us a seating chart and he sat me right between Jake and then one of Jake's best friends. And it was apparent to me right off the bat that Jake was the most popular, handsome guy at PHS, and I was terrified of that. And so I remember actually bringing extra pencils to class in case he asked me for one. So I didn't have to talk to him and say, like, oh, I don't have a pencil. I could just hand him a pencil and I wouldn't have to talk about it. So I already kind of just understood how cute he was and how special he was, but I was just really scared about that. So I brought extra pencils so he wouldn't talk to me. And it worked out. We didn't really talk that
I
year,
was
but
going to say, how did that work out for you?
we didn't really talk that year. I mean, I was pretty shy. We didn't really become friends until his senior year and my junior year, and then we didn't start dating until he got home from his mission. So it was mostly just like we were always around each other, and I always thought he was adorable, but from a distance because that was scary.
That's awesome. So would you say that was kind of hard? Were you a third wheel that year?
Really, I mean, they were pretty loud kids in that class, and I just I just did the best I could, you know? It was
That's
fun to just
awesome.
watch.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I have some fond memories of just being in high school and just talking to classmates like in between lectures and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. What
Yeah,
was your
it's fun.
dating experience like?
Oh, dating in general or just dating Jake?
Dating Jake.
Dating Jake, easy and fun and fast. I feel like it was easy to just see we were on the same path and we had the same goals in mind. And the next step just always felt really obvious. And we just knew that we wanted to do it forever. So
Didn't
I'm
you
I'm
say,
grateful for that.
am I incorrect that he like showed up at your house and your dad
Yeah.
was like, "Yep, you can go." You were like, "I
Yeah.
don't know." Is that
Yeah, no,
true?
yes, I mean, he asked me on several dates, and I said no because I was scared of that. I was too scary to go on a date with him. But my dad really wanted me to go on a date with him. And so one day he finally said, I'm just going to come pick you up. And I said, no, you won't. And he said, yeah, I will. And he did. And my dad answered the door and he made me go. So I had to go on a date with him.
Matchmaker,
I'm
matchmaker.
really, yeah, I'm really glad that I did, though. It turned out well.
That's awesome. I wonder, have you talked to Jake about like why he didn't give up?
Yeah, and maybe it sounds so silly, but he really was somebody that everybody wanted to date. And so I think it was kind of intriguing to him that I didn't want to.
That's awesome.
He
I
was like,
actually
"What?
love
What do
that.
you mean?"
That is a
So,
rom-com right there.
yeah, so I think that's kind of what it was, is that it was a challenge for some reason. I didn't want to. And so he thought that was intriguing. Want to check that out?
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, my next question is, can you share a memorable moment from your early days together?
Oh, yes. I've been thinking about that, going over these questions that you sent me
I was gonna
ahead
say
of
my
time.
mind has gone over like all of the blog posts I've read, and there's so many wonderful moments that I'm sure you could share. So I'm looking forward to
Oh,
see which one you decided on.
you're so sweet. I was thinking about one today, and it's funny because it's not directly about Jake and I, but it was just one of those moments where I had a strong impression that we were making good choices, we were in the right place. And so I was thinking about that one today, but I remember it was right after we decided to buy a home in St. George. And it was at a time where, I mean, it's crazy now, but if a handful of years ago, it was also crazy to buy a house in St. George. And we looked everywhere. We tried to find one. We couldn't find one. We eventually found the one that we wanted, and it was a pretty miraculous experience. We took a look at it, and there were 11 business cards on the table from other real estate agents when we went to look at this house. And so there were at least that many people that had looked at the house and were planning on putting in an offer on this little place. And so we quickly added our offer to the table, and it wasn't anything crazy. We ended up actually running into the son of the old woman that owned the home and talked to him, and he asked what our name was and wanted to he said that if he could, he'd like to choose us to buy the house. And it was a cool experience. So anyway, through all these series of events, we ended up buying the house. And there's a period of time between when you buy the house and then when you actually can live there, when you close on it. So we started that whole process, and my dad hadn't seen it yet. And I was in St. George with him at a little meeting for work. Jake wasn't there. I don't remember why he wasn't there, but it was just my dad and I. And we got lunch from our little meeting, and he said, "What are the odds of us getting into your little place?" So it wasn't ours yet. I'm like, "Well, I could check and see." So I reached out to our real estate agent, and he got the code for the door and let us in. And so I got to go eat lunch for the first time in our little house with my dad. And I remember sitting just at the little kitchen table that was still there, the current owners of the home. And we ate our little packaged Chick-fil-A lunch, and we were just talking. And my dad expressed how proud he was of Jake and I and all the things that we'd accomplished so far. And I just remember sitting there and feeling so grateful for Jake and for that little house and just for the path that we were on, the place that Heavenly Father had led us. And that house really became a consecrated place for us. And I think about that little lunch all the time. And I feel like that set us up for a pretty cool part of our life so far. But I know that wasn't about Jake specifically, but it was one of those moments where I thought, you know what, we're in the right place. We're doing good. And I think of that often.
I wasn't expecting to feel the spirit and get emotional. So, wow. No, that's so beautiful. And I love that that moment stood out to you, because I feel like sometimes people think, it's got to be this big moment, or it's got to be, the time you proposed or whatever. But I love that it was just, we ate lunch in our little house that we just bought, and that's beautiful. And just because I love the word consecration and consecrated. So I just want to say consecrated is like to make holy, or like a sacred place. So just for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it was a little holy, sacred home is what you're saying. So
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, to move on to the next question, are there ever any downs in your marriage? If there are, what are those like, and how do you overcome them?
I love this question. I was actually thinking about one of my favorite stories in the scriptures. So when the Savior delivers the Sermon on the Mount, at the very end of all these beautiful beatitudes, and here's all the things we need to do, he throws in the parable of the wise man and the foolish man, which seems to be such a strange place to tell that story, but I love it. And if you don't know the story of the wise man and the foolish man, that's the one that the wise man built his house upon a rock, and the foolish man built his house upon the sand, and then the rains come. And the wise man, his house stands still on that foundation, and the foolish man, his house washes away because the foundation isn't stable enough. And one thing I think about with that story is that rains come to both of those people, the wise man and the foolish man. And I think if we were to talk about this in terms of marriages and relationships, no one is exempt from rain. And even in other places in the scriptures, it talks about how the sun shines and rain falls on the wicked and on the righteous. The good things and bad things will happen to every single person, no matter what. It's because of this mortal life that we've chosen to be part of. But there is something we can control, and that's what this story is why this story is so cool. We can build our relationships or our lives or whatever we want to apply this to on a foundation, or we can build it on the sand. That's what we get to choose. And that foundation we learn in the Book of Mormon is Jesus Christ. And if we build our relationships on him, then no matter what ups or downs we experience, we can have a solid foundation. And I've definitely felt that and seen that in my relationship. Jake and I chose to be sealed together in the temple, and I believe that has made the biggest difference for us and for our family, that no matter what ups or downs we experience, that we don't fall, that we don't have to be tossed to and fro with all the different rains that come, but we can stand still. And I've felt that stillness in many different circumstances in our lives.
That's beautiful. I was going to say, I want to bring up what you said in the text because it was so beautiful. You said, there are going to be hard times, but Jake and I decided that didn't want them to come from internally and go out, that they were going to come externally and come in. And I feel like that is such a beautiful way to put it, that no matter what, there are going to be difficult times, but to strive to have those come from an outside instead of like coming out
Right.
from your relationship, which is just, I don't know, I feel like I didn't think about that, and it was really profound. So thank you. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, of course.
And I've started watching The Chosen finally. My dad has finally gotten me on it. And it's so cool because I watched that episode of the Sermon on the Mount, and he talks about the wise man and the foolish man. And I just never realized that that was right next to the Beatitudes. But it is. So
There it
yeah,
is.
I love it. I love it. Okay, my next question is, how do you handle disagreements or conflicts?
And I think I shared this with you before. Jake and I just aren't really, we're not fighters really, but we have hurt each other's feelings and we have disagreed on things. And so I think I'll speak from those experiences. But one of the things that I try to do is to think about how I felt the day that we were sealed. And I think about how excited we were and how hopeful we were and how we had no idea what we would experience in the upcoming years and the promises that we made to each other and to God. And it's really hard to think about those big picture, eternal things and to be upset about something like getting a ticket or not picking up something at the grocery store or whatever it is that you can disagree on. It's really hard to be upset about those things when you think about those eternal moments in your life and the hopes and things that you're looking forward to.
I was going to say, I think that's the definition of thinking celestial.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. I think it was Sister Bednar. She talked about something similar there's like a video of a tour of the Rome, Italy temple. That's one of my favorites. And she talks about how when she and Elder Bednar don't see eye to eye, which always makes me giggle. I'm like, I wonder what you guys disagree about, but it's so cute. But she said that she thinks about her covenants and that it helps her to see things a little more clearly. I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I feel like it's one way that you don't sweat the small stuff, is what you said when
Right.
you responded to me. So to kind of give context to the listeners, I asked Maddie some of these questions over text, and she replied, and so I'm quoting her words back at her. So I hope she doesn't mind that. But yeah, I just feel like I loved everything that you've said, so thank you so much. And I totally agree that when you look at things with a bigger perspective, the little stuff just doesn't matter as much.
Totally.
And honestly, if your relationship is full of moments when you just assume good intent, then you
Yep.
really won't have like hurt feelings as much as you could have, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
I remember reading one of your blog posts about open drawers or something, and how
Yeah.
some people would get so annoyed that, their spouse or their partner left all of these drawers open, but you looked at the drawers and you just missed him and loved him because you knew that that was, just a characteristic about him.
Yes.
And so I think that's amazing. Deciding and choosing to enjoy and treasure the little things about them rather than like getting upset.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
I'm grateful for that perspective too.
that's perfect. Okay, my next question is, what role does humor play in your relationship?
I loved that question too. One experience came to mind. I remember I was at the grocery store one day and Jake wasn't feeling well, so I was getting like Powerade and saltine crackers and applesauce and stuff like that. And there was a lady in line behind me and she said, "Oh, do you have a sick baby?" And I said, "Just a sick husband." And she said, "Well, remember, laughter is the best medicine." And I walked back out to my car and I thought, how can I make Jake laugh? And it's funny because I've thought about that experience quite a bit. If we can laugh, then we know that everything's okay still, even when things are hard. That if we can find something to giggle about, then that means that we're still okay, that we can get through it. I've thought about that often, and we look for those opportunities to laugh. Like today, our kids were loud and people kept knocking on the door and there's stuff everywhere. And I was just trying to go to the gas station and get a drink because it's Thirsty Thursday. And we both buckled in, one kid, and we met at the back of the car on the way to our seats. And we both just laughed like, what is the chaos of our life right now? Oh, but it's always good. It's good to laugh about some of these things.
I was gonna say I created a whole podcast episode about the random things that I laugh about because
Oh, yeah.
I just laugh at myself all the time. It makes life so much more enjoyable.
Totally. Totally.
Like the time I trudged through the snow and I just thought it was hilarious. Like I don't know. It was just random and
It's just good.
yeah. So do you remember what you did to make him laugh?
Oh, I don't. I think we probably just watched a funny movie or something. I wish I remembered. I bet if I looked in my journal, I would find it.
I was just curious. There's not a big deal. But yeah, I love that. I feel like humor is huge. And I feel like also, this is just my opinion, but when you get to know someone really well and when you get to love someone, you kind of know like what makes them laugh.
Totally.
Because that's totally the case with my cousin and I. Like, I just know what will make her laugh. I know what
Yeah.
stupid thing that I say or that I do and what phrase or what way I say it, what tone I say it will make her laugh. And I feel like that's
Right.
probably important too.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely true.
In order to split the episodes to be about 20 minutes each, I ended up closing this episode off. So we will finish this interview in part 2. I hope to see you there.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to embrace imperfection, find meaning, satisfaction, and joy from the journey. I'm Kyra.
I'm Maddie.
And this is Imperfectly Broken, the podcast.
Do, 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 do.